Between 1968 and 1969, a predator stalked the quiet streets and lovers' lanes of Northern California. A man who toyed with police, mocked journalists, and terrified an entire state. He called himself the Zodiac, and he claimed to have killed as many as 37 people, though investigators only confirmed 5. But here's the most chilling part. Despite decades of manhunts, thousands of tips, and even his own taunting letters, the Zodiac was never caught. To this day, his identity remains one of the greatest mysteries in true crime history. Tonight, we're diving deep into the twisted story of the Zodiac Killer, his confirmed murders, his bizarre coded letters, and the suspects who might have been hiding behind that chilling name. It all began on December 20th, 1968, a cold Friday night just days before Christmas. 17-year-old David Faraday and 16-year-old Betty Lou Jensen had just started dating, and that night was supposed to be special. David had promised Betty's parents he'd have her home by 11, but the two teenagers decided to take a drive through Vallejo, heading toward Lake Herman Road, a quiet, isolated stretch known as a lover's lane. Betty wore a purple dress. David had on a light-colored jacket, and together they represented the picture of young love at the cusp of freedom. They parked in a gravel turnout, hoping to share a few private moments under the winter sky. But they weren't alone. Around 10:15 p.m., witnesses later recalled seeing David's Rambler station wagon parked there, headlights off. A second car pulled up behind them, its driver stepping out. The figure moved quickly toward the Rambler, armed with a gun. Within seconds, the quiet December night exploded into terror. The killer fired into the car, shattering windows. David tried to protect Betty, but the gunman forced them out of the vehicle. In the chaos, David was shot once in the head at point-blank range, collapsing beside the car. Betty bolted, running for her life across the field, but she didn't make it far. 5 bullets tore into her back, dropping her just 28 feet from the car. When their bodies were discovered a short time later, the scene was devastating. Betty lay face down in the dirt. David's body was slumped on the ground near the rear wheel. Shell casings from a .22 caliber weapon were scattered nearby. There were no fingerprints, no tire tracks, no usable evidence. Just 2 dead teenagers, a shaken community, and an unknown killer who seemed to vanish into the night. The double murder shocked Vallejo, but at first police believed it might be a crime of passion or even a random act of violence. They had no idea this was just the beginning of a nightmare that would grip California for years to come. 6 months later, on July 4th, 1969, the killer struck again. That evening, Darlene Farron, a 22-year-old waitress, spent time at a party before heading out with a friend, 19-year-old Michael Mageau. The two drove to Blue Rock Springs Park, another known lover's lane in Vallejo. It was just after midnight, fireworks from the holiday celebrations still echoing faintly in the distance. Darlene was popular and outgoing, married but known to enjoy casual outings with friends. Michael was quieter, nervous, still just a teenager. They parked Darlene's brown Corvair in the lot, hoping for some privacy. Moments later, another car pulled up behind them, its headlights flooding their vehicle. At first, they thought it was the police. But after a few moments, the car drove away, only to return 10 minutes later. This time, the driver stepped out, holding a flashlight and a gun. Without a word, he approached the passenger's side, raised his weapon, and opened fire into the car. Bullets ripped through the vehicle, striking Michael in the face, chest, and leg. Darlene was hit multiple times, though she tried to shield herself from the barrage. The shooter turned to walk away, then, chillingly, returned to fire 5 more shots into the helpless couple before calmly driving off. Despite his wounds, Michael Mageau survived. He later told police the attacker was a stocky white male, around 5 feet 8 inches, with short brown hair, though in the chaos of the moment, details were blurred. Darlene Ferrin, however, was pronounced dead upon arrival at the hospital. She had been shot 9 times. But what truly set this crime apart was what came next. Just 40 minutes after the shooting, at 12:40 a.m., a call came in to the Vallejo Police Department. The man on the other end spoke calmly, even cheerfully. "I want to report a double murder. If you will go 1 mile east on Columbus Parkway, you will find kids in a brown car. They were shot with a 9mm Luger. I also killed those kids last year. Goodbye." The call was traced to a phone booth just blocks away from the police station. By the time officers arrived, the phone was still dangling off the hook. The killer had been so close, and yet managed to slip away unnoticed. This was the first time the killer claimed responsibility for both Blue Rock Springs and the Lake Herman Road murders, linking the crimes together. And soon, the world would know him by a name that would forever haunt true crime history: the Zodiac. On September 27, 1969, college students Brian Hartnell and Cecilia Shepard were enjoying a peaceful afternoon at Lake Berryessa, a popular recreational spot northeast of Napa Valley. Brian, a 20-year-old law student, and Cecilia, 22, spread out a blanket on a secluded area by the water, enjoying sandwiches and conversation as the warm sun dipped lower in the sky. But around 6:30 p.m., their idyllic outing was shattered. Cecilia noticed a strange figure approaching from the distance. At first, she thought it might be a fisherman, but as he drew closer, dread set in. The man wore a bizarre, homemade black hood, with clip-on sunglasses covering his eyes, and a bib-like panel on his chest featuring a white circle with a cross through it, the now infamous Zodiac symbol. He held a gun in one hand, a long knife in the other. When he reached the couple, his voice was calm, almost rehearsed. He claimed to be an escaped convict from Deer Lodge Prison in Montana, saying he needed money and a car to flee to Mexico. The couple, terrified but compliant, tried to reason with him. Brian offered his wallet and car keys, hoping the man would take them and leave. But the hooded figure shook his head. He forced Cecilia to tie Brian's hands with pre-cut lengths of plastic clothesline. Then he tied her up as well. Once both were restrained, he suddenly pulled out the knife and began stabbing them repeatedly. Brian was stabbed 6 times in the back and chest, while Cecilia was stabbed 10 times. Their screams echoed across the lake, but no one came in time. After the brutal attack, the man calmly walked back up the hill toward Brian's white Volkswagen Carmen Ghia. Using a black marker, he scrawled a chilling message on the car door. Vallejo, December 20th, 68, July 4th, 69, September 27th, 69, 6:30 by knife. It was his way of signing the crime, leaving no doubt this was the work of the Zodiac. Miraculously, Brian Hartnell survived his wounds and was able to give police a detailed account of the attack. Cecilia, however, slipped into a coma on the way to the hospital and died 2 days later. The brutality of the crime, combined with the killer's eerie costume and confession on the car door, cemented Zodiac's reputation as a sadistic predator who enjoyed terror as much as murder. Just 2 weeks later, the Zodiac struck again, this time in the heart of San Francisco. On the night of October 11, 1969, Paul Stein, a 29-year-old cab driver, picked up a fare near the Theater District. The passenger requested a ride to Presidio Heights, an upscale residential neighborhood. At approximately 9:55 p.m., Stein's taxi stopped at the corner of Washington and Cherry Street. But instead of paying, the passenger pulled out a gun and shot Stein once in the head. The killer then calmly leaned over the lifeless driver, tearing away a piece of his shirt as a grisly trophy. He wiped down parts of the cab to remove fingerprints before stepping out and casually walking away. But this time, Zodiac was nearly caught in the act. Across the street, three teenagers watched the entire murder unfold from their window. Horrified, they immediately called police, reporting what they saw. Within minutes, patrol cars were swarming the area. Officers Donald Falk and Eric Zelms were among those searching the neighborhood. They even encountered a white male walking casually on Jackson Street, about a block from the crime scene. He was described as stocky, about 5 feet 10 inches, with light-colored hair, wearing glasses and a dark jacket. But because of a miscommunication, officers believed they were searching for a black male suspect, so they let the man walk by without questioning him. That mistake would haunt the investigation forever. When police arrived at the cab, they found Paul Stein slumped over the steering wheel, blood soaking his shirt. Shell casings were recovered, and the piece of the shirt was confirmed missing. Days later, a letter arrived at the San Francisco Chronicle, containing the missing swatch of Paul Stein's shirt as proof of the killer's identity. In the letter, Zodiac mocked police for failing to catch him, even bragging that he had spoken with officers just minutes after the murder. This brazen act of taunting cemented his reputation, not just as a killer, but as a manipulator who thrived on fear and humiliation. For San Francisco residents, the terror was no longer confined to quiet lovers' lanes or remote areas. The Zodiac had brought his violence into the city itself, leaving everyone feeling vulnerable. Just days after Paul Stein's murder, the Zodiac began a letter-writing campaign that would terrify the public and baffle cryptographers for decades. In total, he sent over 20 letters and postcards to newspapers across Northern California, including the San Francisco Chronicle, San Francisco Examiner, and Vallejo Times-Herald. These weren't ordinary letters. They contained rambling boasts, threats against school children, and elaborate cryptograms, complex coded messages Zodiac insisted would reveal his identity if solved. His first cipher, known as the 408-symbol cipher, was cracked by a schoolteacher and his wife in just 1 week. The message was chilling. "I like killing people because it is so much fun. It is more fun than killing wild game in the forest. Man is the most dangerous animal of all." But crucially, the message ended with, "I will not give you my name, because you will try to slow down or stop my collecting of slaves for my afterlife." Later ciphers were far more complex, including the infamous 340-character cipher, which went unsolved for over 50 years. In 2020, an international team of codebreakers finally cracked it. The solution revealed Zodiac's mocking tone once again. He dismissed attempts to catch him, denied being afraid of the gas chamber, and bragged about his reign of terror. Yet, even in this solution, he never revealed his true identity. The letters often included hand-drawn symbols, crosshairs, and bizarre references to pop culture. Particularly the 1930s film The Most Dangerous Game, which featured a man hunting human prey for sport. Every time one of his letters appeared in the newspapers, panic rippled through California. Parents kept children home from school, couples avoided lovers' lanes, and police struggled to separate Zodiac's real threats from his twisted fantasies. Over the years, countless men have been considered suspects in the Zodiac case. Some were briefly investigated and cleared. Others became the focus of intense speculation. The most famous suspect was Arthur Lee Allen, a convicted child molester and Vallejo resident. Allen owned a Zodiac brand wristwatch, featuring the same crosshair logo used in the killer's letters. He was known to frequent the same areas as the victims, and he even allegedly told friends he wanted to kill couples at lovers' lanes. In 1972, police searched his home, finding weapons and disturbing writings. However, Allen's fingerprints and handwriting did not match the Zodiac's, and DNA from envelopes ruled him out decades later. Another suspect was Richard Gaikowski, a journalist with radical leanings who lived in the Bay Area during the murders. Some noted his physical resemblance to police sketches, while others pointed out that his name appeared to fit into Zodiac's unsolved ciphers. There was also Lawrence Kane, a man with a brain injury who lived near Darlene Ferrand in Vallejo. He had a history of stalking women, and one of the surviving victims later picked him out of a lineup. In recent years, a group of investigators called the Case Breakers named Gary Francis Post, a house painter who died in 2018, as the prime suspect. They claimed to have linked him through forensic evidence, photos, and witness accounts. However, law enforcement agencies have never officially confirmed this theory. Despite dozens of suspects, no one has ever been definitively proven to be the Zodiac. The Zodiac Killer remains one of America's most infamous criminals, not only for his brutality, but for the way he manipulated fear itself. Unlike most killers, Zodiac seemed less interested in killing for necessity and more obsessed with attention. He wanted control, power, and the ability to make an entire state tremble at the sight of his symbol. His confirmed victims were just 5 people, yet his myth looms far larger, thanks to his cryptic ciphers, taunting letters, and the mystery of his identity. Over 50 years later, countless books, documentaries, and films have been made about the Zodiac. Amateur sleuths still pore over his ciphers, debating suspects online, while cold case detectives continue to test DNA evidence with the latest technology. But perhaps the most chilling part is this. The Zodiac may have lived out his life quietly, blending into society, his dark secret hidden from everyone around him. And as long as his true identity remains unknown, the legend of the Zodiac Killer will never die. He hunted young couples, mocked the police, terrified a city, and vanished into the shadows. Was he a genius who outsmarted everyone, or just a coward hiding behind symbols and fear? One thing is certain. The Zodiac Killer remains unsolved, and perhaps always will. But what do you think? Was the Zodiac a criminal mastermind, or just a lucky killer who slipped through the cracks? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Maybe together, we'll get closer to the truth. And if you found this story chilling, don't forget to like the video, share it with a friend who loves true crime, and subscribe for more mysteries that remain unsolved.